The coffee machine sputtered to life with a tired groan, struggling to brew another pot of bitter government-issued caffeine. The walls were lined with worn-out flags and faded posters reading, "Thank you for your service." Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a dull glow across the scratched pool table and sagging couches. It wasn't much, but to the vets who came here daily, it was home. That's where Eli worked. Just Eli. No one ever got a last name. He showed up before sunrise, swept floors, fixed leaky faucets, and always made sure the coffee was ready before the first therapy group started at 9. He didn't talk much. Didn't wear anything military-looking. No ball cap with service patches, no stories about back in the day. He just did his job, polite as ever, nodding with a small, reserved smile to anyone who acknowledged him. The guys noticed him, but barely. They called him things like Ghost, Shadow, or Quiet Eli. No one took him seriously. After all, he was just the janitor. One Tuesday morning, while he was crouched under the sink in the rec room, trying to stop a pipe from groaning like a dying mule, Eli pushed up his sleeve. A glint of ink caught the light. Tanner, a 27-year-old vet with a prosthetic leg and a loud mouth, spotted it first. He squinted, tilting his head. "Yo, Eli. What's that? Some kind of old biker tattoo?" Eli glanced at his arm, then pulled the sleeve down without saying anything. But Tanner was already grinning. "Come on, let me see that. You in a gang or something?" A few of the other vets gathered around, intrigued. The tattoo was unlike anything they'd seen. It looked like a dagger with wings, sharp, detailed, almost ancient, and beneath it were numbers and letters that didn't make any sense. Coordinates, maybe? A mission code? Looks like some Navy SEAL fantasy stuff, someone joked. Probably from a movie. Bet it says Mom in invisible ink, another chimed in. Eli stood slowly, giving a tired but amused look. "Just a tattoo," he said softly, wiping his hands on a rag. The laughter continued as he packed up his tools and walked out. He didn't seem angry. Just distant. Like he'd heard that joke 100 times before and let it pass every time. But what none of them saw, not until much later, was the faint tremble in Eli's hand as he turned the doorknob to leave. Or the way his eyes lingered on the patch-covered jackets hanging on the coat rack. Or how he paused, just briefly, to glance at the American flag fluttering outside the window. Because that tattoo wasn't just ink. It was a memory, one he'd buried deeper than most people could understand. But soon, the past was about to come roaring back. There was the usual buzz of conversation, laughter over someone's bad poker hand, the clink of plastic coffee mugs, and the occasional bark from Charlie, the golden retriever therapy dog. But underneath it all, something lingered. A curiosity. A question that refused to settle. The tattoo. Tanner, never one to let something go, brought it up again during the session. "Guys, I'm telling you, that tattoo on Eli's arm? It wasn't your average barbed wire or eagle thing. It looked official. Weirdly official." "You mean like military?" asked Lucas, a former Army engineer. "I dunno, man. It just felt different. Like it meant something." Someone scoffed. "It's Eli. The guy barely says 10 words a day. You really think he was some secret assassin?" The group laughed, but a few glanced at the door where Eli usually passed by with the coffee pot or his mop. He wasn't around. Not tonight. Just then, the doors opened, and in walked Colonel Everett Hayes. A towering presence in full dress blues, even though he was retired. A legend in certain military circles. He was visiting to speak about resilience and leadership during combat. Most of the younger vets stood a little taller when he entered. As the colonel shook hands and shared greetings, Tanner couldn't help himself. "Hey, Colonel, you ever seen a tattoo like this?" He pulled out a napkin with a crude sketch he'd drawn from memory. It wasn't perfect, but the outline was close enough, the winged dagger, the strange code below. Hayes took the napkin, eyes narrowing the moment he saw it. The chatter faded. "Where'd you see this?" he asked quietly, but there was a sharp edge in his tone now. "Janitor here. Eli. He's got it on his arm. We were just messing around." "You saw this on someone?" Hayes cut in, his voice lower now. Tanner nodded, suddenly unsure. "Yeah. He said it was just a tattoo." The colonel's jaw tightened. He looked around. "Where is he now?" "He left after fixing the sink earlier." Hayes looked down at the napkin again. "That's not just a tattoo. That ink's classified." The room went silent. The kind of silence that settles like fog, heavy and complete. Hayes looked around, voice calm but cold. "That symbol belonged to a unit that didn't officially exist. Deep Recon. Black Ops. We called it Task Shadow. Only 6 people wore that ink. And they only got it if they came back alive." A chill ran through the room. "Whoever that man is, you don't joke about tattoos like that." The vets exchanged stunned looks. The janitor, quiet Eli, suddenly wasn't just a background figure. He was a mystery that none of them had seen coming. And now they couldn't unsee it. The next evening, Eli stood alone on the rooftop of the VA hospital, leaning on the rusted railing with a steaming cup of black coffee in his hand. Below, the flag out front rippled softly in the summer breeze. He had always liked this time of day, when the sun painted the buildings in gold and shadows softened the hard lines of memory. He didn't hear the rooftop door open behind him, but he knew someone was there. "You always disappear up here," came the voice. Eli turned slightly. Colonel Hayes stood a few feet away, not in dress blues this time, but a worn windbreaker and jeans. He looked less like a legend now, and more like someone who carried similar ghosts. "I like the quiet," Eli said, not quite smiling. They stood in silence for a moment. The kind of silence between men who didn't need small talk. "You didn't have to lie," the colonel said gently. "Not to us." Eli looked back out over the town. "Didn't lie. Just didn't speak." Hayes stepped closer, his voice low. "That tattoo. You earned it. And you carried it alone for what, 30, maybe 40 years? Why keep it hidden?" Eli's jaw worked for a second. Then he exhaled. "Laos, 82. Operation Snowglass. We weren't supposed to be there. Our orders didn't officially exist. Intel said a POW camp was being dismantled, too late to save anyone. But we went anyway. 6 of us." He paused. The words came slowly, like unsealing a vault that hadn't been opened in decades. "We walked into hell. Tripwires, mines, guards everywhere. But the intel was wrong, they were still there. 22 American soldiers. Barely breathing. Tortured. Forgotten." Hayes listened without interruption, his eyes clouded with recognition. "We got them out. All of them. Lost 3 of our 6 doing it. And I took a round to the hip." Eli tapped his side. "Figured that was the end of it. But no medal. No report. No recognition. We didn't exist, remember?" "Task Shadow," Hayes said quietly. Eli nodded. "When I came home, I didn't want any parades. I didn't want to be thanked. I just wanted to fade out. So I did." Hayes was quiet for a long beat. Then he said, "You fading out might have been okay for you. But I think you've still got something the world needs." Eli gave a quiet laugh. "I'm a janitor, Colonel." "No," Hayes replied, eyes steady. "You're a reminder of what sacrifice really looks like. These young vets downstairs? They don't need a hero in a uniform. They need a man who understands the silence. Who shows up? Who listens? That's you." The wind rustled around them. For the first time in a long time, Eli didn't feel invisible. A light breeze danced through the courtyard as rows of folding chairs filled with veterans, staff, and townspeople. The garden behind the VA hospital had never looked so well kept. Freshly mulched flower beds lined the walkways, flags fluttered from every corner, and a handmade wooden podium stood in front of a newly erected stone plaque, still covered by a velvet cloth. At the back of the crowd, Eli stood quietly in his usual work boots and flannel shirt. He didn't want this. He'd made that clear. But Colonel Hayes had only smiled and said, "You didn't ask to be honored. This isn't about you. It's about who you've been to us." The colonel stepped up to the podium. No pomp. No military music. Just heartfelt silence and respect. "I want to talk about a man most of you know," Hayes began. "You've walked past him in the hall. Maybe asked him to fix the thermostat or refill the coffee pot. Some of you called him Quiet Eli. But I'm here to tell you, Eli's silence was never emptiness. It was filled with more bravery and compassion than most of us could ever hope to carry." He paused, letting the words settle. Years ago, Eli was part of a mission that never made the news. A mission that saved lives, including mine. But he never spoke of it. Never asked for credit. Instead, he came back home and served in a different way, quietly caring for other veterans, making sure their space was clean, their coffee was warm, and their dignity was never lost. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Tanner, seated in the front row, wiped at his eyes and stood up. "I used to think a hero was someone who charged through gunfire or wore a uniform full of medals," he said. "But Eli changed that for me. He showed me that strength can be quiet. That being there, really being there, for people matters just as much. Maybe more." At Hayes' signal, two nurses gently pulled back the velvet cloth to reveal the plaque. It was simple, but striking. The engraving read, "In honor of Eli Walker. For the battles fought in silence, and the lives quietly lifted in their wake." Below the inscription was a small carving of Eli's tattoo, the winged dagger, not as a symbol of war, but of resilience and sacrifice. The crowd stood in a silent ovation. Not loud. Not thunderous. But reverent. Deep. Eli looked down, eyes welling despite himself. For years, he thought his story ended in the shadows. That his service was over. But today, he realized, it had just taken on a new form. As the sun dipped low, casting a golden light over the garden, Eli finally stepped forward, not as a janitor, not as a ghost, but as a quiet hero whose legacy would speak for generations.